Let's have words. Let's say what it's all about. We're gonna say what it's about. We're gonna talk it out. Well, hello everybody, and welcome to Let's Have Words. I am your host, Miss LARA Samuels. We are here broadcasting on WWHR Internet Media every Thursday. We are live every other Thursday, so we do a live, and then we do a rebroadcast, and we do a live again, etc. Every Thursday, 7 p.m., and welcome. I'm glad you're tuning in. So let me just give you a quick rundown of what this show is all about. On Let's Have Words, we discuss issues that are related to the environmental crisis. We focus on three things in particular: the biodiversity crisis, which is very dear to my heart. I like to call it the nature crisis. And also the climate crisis and pollution. So those three very broad, very big topics are all connected. They're all interconnected for sure. They overlap, but they have, and they are all the result. Biodiversity loss, climate change, and pollution are all the result of human activity, obviously. So that's one thing they all share, and they overlap, and they have some things in common, but they have different causes. So you can't, we need to address them. It is the position of the show that we need to address all these things together, but that they have separate causes too. So we proceed with that in mind. So it is the position of the show that biodiversity loss is happening, that we are losing species at a very fast pace, and that we are en route, if we continue with business as usual, to, ecosystems collapsing, and that we are warming the planet as well, and that is causing all sorts of problems with planetary homeostasis, and that comes from burning fossil fuels. We're bringing CO2. We're adding more CO2 to the atmosphere, and that is what is warming the planet and leading to all sorts of catastrophic results. We also think that we can fix these problems. So we do try not to be doom and gloom, although I don't like that phrase necessarily, because I think it is important to discuss these problems and address the urgency. And you can't address the urgency unless you really sound the alarm, right? So sounding the alarm is part of waking people up so that we can get, some solutions happening, right? So it's not that we're saying, everything that's going on right now on the planet, all this stuff is terrible, right? We're not just saying it's awful. We're not just saying it's terrible. We're not just bitching and whining and moaning about that. We are saying these are really serious issues. It's an urgent situation. We need to act. We have solutions, and we need to implement those solutions, right? So the content on this show is very much, along those lines. So we try to present some statistics and some facts that, hopefully will convince people that there is a problem to begin with, because there's a lot of denial. There's a lot of people that really just don't even want to face these problems. Are so big. I understand that sometimes people just don't even want to deal with them. But so we want to wake people up so that we can take action and solve these problems. Okay, so that is sort of the an overall summary of what we do here on the show. It is a call-in show. I would love for you guys to call in. I really want to talk to people. That's part of what this show is about. It's about conversation. It's about discourse. It doesn't necessarily mean if you call in that you have to agree, as long as you are ready to present your arguments in a way that is respectful. We can have. It is my belief that we can have, despite a lot of evidence to the contrary, that we can have real discussions, substantial discussions. We can have policy differences, we can disagree, but we can still respect one another as individuals, and we can find some common ground. There, as I'm sure you are aware, there's a lot of the clashes between you have to pick a side, right? It's like politics right now. Is the environment really politics? Well, unfortunately, it's been made into a political issue. It shouldn't really be, but the way politics has been, how we've been exercising our political voices lately, have very much in a black and white sort of team sport sort of way. That is not what we want to do here on the show. We're not looking to demonize anybody. We're looking to have substantial discussions that hopefully result in coming to some understanding or finding some common ground. And everybody, this is something I've learned as a teacher, everybody has something to offer. Everybody has strengths and weaknesses, and everybody has some way of presenting content, even stuff you're familiar with that you've never considered before. That's why we have conversations, right? So to walk around as though you know everything or as though your position is unassailable, I just don't think that leads to any sort of progress. I think it's very unproductive. I think we have to respect that we have different perspectives and we have strengths and weaknesses, and we all bring something to the table so we can have discussions on these problems. Also, I'm a problem solver. Like I want to solve problems. I don't, as long as the problem can be solved, it's not like I have some, I'm married to some particular ideology, I look at a problem and say, okay, this is an issue. How are we going to solve it? Biodiversity loss is happening. Nature loss is happening. We're losing nature at a rapid pace. This is not only, detrimental and dangerous for the survival of humans. It is also a social justice issue. We share the planet with all these other animals, and there's no reason why we have the right to just wipe them out in order to, satisfy our own needs. So, we need to address these issues. All right. So I would love for you to call in and have a substantial discussion over these things. The show is divided into 3 parts. The first part is called Let's Do the Numbers. And in that part of the show, we take some statistics. So I sort of harvest numbers that I encounter, through reading a lot about this topic. And we talk about the numbers and we talk about what they mean. So it's a satire, of course, because Let's Do the Numbers is a phrase that comes from the Marketplace show, which maybe you've heard, maybe you haven't heard, which is a program that you hear on public radio. And of course, Let's Do the Numbers. What are the numbers? They're from the stock market, right? So we do a Let's Do the Numbers, but instead of discussing the stock market, instead of discussing the economy, we are discussing nature loss and or numbers having to do with the planet. So we're going to do that. And then we have a second section that is called What's on Lara's Mind, and that's just kind of when I riff on something that I've been thinking about recently. Sometimes I'm thinking about more than one thing, so hopefully that doesn't get too chaotic. And then we do peruse the news. We just look through. I have a few news items this week. I'm looking over them. They look mostly positive. I've got 3 things I want to discuss, and at least 2 out of the 3 are good, in terms of it's actually positive news, right? We could use some positive news. I'm really tired of bad news. So even though I'm tired of bad news, we're going to kick it off with let's do the numbers, and I've got a lot of bad news. All right, here we go. Let's do the numbers. All right, our first number tonight is 450,000. That, according to a book I'm reading right now, which is a wonderful book that you should all read, Becoming Nature Positive, which is a book, collaboratively written by people that are concerned about nature loss. And the term nature positive, you have to think of it as, a term like carbon neutral, right? So carbon neutral and nature positive are it's a similar way of addressing these problems, except with nature positive, we want to actually increase the amount of nature that we have by, being nature positive means that it's actually a goal. Nature positive is a goal. And the goal is, I hope I say this right, is to halt and reverse biodiversity loss, bring it back to 2020 levels. Is it 2020? I don't know. Anyway, bring it back to 2020 levels by 2030 and then exceed 2020 levels by 2050. All right, I hope I said that right. If not, please call in and correct me. I'm happy to be corrected. That's what nature positive means. It means actually more nature. So nature right now is in decline, and what we want to do is we want to make it go up instead of down. That's what nature positive means. Okay, so in this book, Becoming Nature Positive, the discussion is about, how do we make this happen, right? And there's 3 real ways that we make this happen, in my estimation, in my interpretation of this book. And that is that we enhance our conservation efforts, that we restore degraded ecosystems, and, my favorite part, that we integrate nature into the places we live and work. So we do all 3 of those things. And we change our economy, in other words. So our economy right now, by the way, I am going to get back to the 450,000, do not worry, right? But our economy, the Western economy, so I'm from the United States, so the U.S. economy, but also this is happening globally, the way we develop, the way we grow food, the way, just the way we live, our lifestyles, our consumer lifestyles, everything is contributing to nature loss. I would argue that our economy is an anti-nature economy. And if we continue with business as usual, we're going to be in serious jeopardy. And nature will continue to decline with with some predictable outcomes, but some of it is, a lot of it is unknown. I mean, how it's all going to actually play out. We're causing a lot of problems that with ecosystem collapse that we can't even see. So, I think of the Earth as kind of a human body, because I am I teach, but for a while I was a nurse, and I think a lot about, I teach, anatomy and physiology, so I think a lot about homeostasis, about the human body and maintaining homeostasis. And I just recently started thinking about this, how the planet is also like a living body, in the sense that there's Becoming Nature Positive book that I'm reading. And, in the book they point out that 450,000 sounds actually like a lot of elephants. These would be wild elephants. Until you realize that just 20 years ago, there were 1.2 million elephants on the planet. Okay, so really let that sink in. 20 years, we have lost over half of the wild elephant population. And that's just one species, right? Or, well, elephants, there's different species of elephant. But that's just one group. Nuts. 1 million species are en route to extinction within decades. Decades, not thousands of years, not hundreds of years, within decades, within our lifetimes. Now, I'm in my late 50s, within my lifetime. Within, by the time I'm, in my late 80s, if I make it to that, 1 million species could go extinct in that time frame. So that, and remember, species don't just exist in isolation. Species are part of ecosystems. So when we lose a species, we don't just lose that one species. We lose everything that's dependent upon that species as well, and that can lead to unknown consequences if it leads to entire ecosystems collapsing. Unknown consequences. All right, I am scaring people right now. I hope so anyway. But remember why I'm scaring people. I'm not scaring people to, make people depressed. I'm scaring people so that people will take action, realize the urgency of the situation. If the body is sick, right? We have to fix it. We have to intervene to fix the problem. That's what I'm talking about here. But these are like the lab values, right? These are the lab values that indicate that there's something going on that we need to address here. 35% of marine mammals are under threat. 40% of amphibians. And the thing is about this is these numbers too. I want you to think about this too. Under threat or going extinct. Those statistics are frightening, but keep in mind that even common species are in decline. So even the ones that aren't necessarily threatened or aren't necessarily, endangered, they're still declining. Their numbers are still going down. Common species are declining. So it's not just these animals that are threatened or bound to go extinct. It's virtually all groups of animals that we have to worry about. And when I say groups, I mean broad groups, right? There are some animals that are actually increasing, but it's not very. But when we think of groups of animals like amphibians, fish, we're talking in the trillions, right? Okay, so but these are just direct subsidies, $725 billion a year. Imagine if we took that money and put it towards building nature positive, infrastructure, building green energy, building out our green energy infrastructure. Imagine if we took that money and spent it on that instead. That would be wonderful. Okay, that was a lot of those numbers were all very, very dire, but I do want to point out that we can fix it. We can fix the problem, but we need to wake up to how serious the problem is, and that's what the numbers this week are all about, right? Okay. What's on Lara's mind?
What's on Lara's mind tonight? What's on Lara's mind?
All right. Well, I have a couple things that I wanted to discuss, but I can probably only discuss one of these things. So last time I spoke about how, about the forest fires. By the way, this is a call-in show. Did I mention that? Please feel free to call in if you have, I really want people to interact with me about these things. I'm putting out these numbers here. Maybe you have a different perspective, or maybe you have some, questions. I mean, I might be able to answer some questions. Maybe, you want to add something, perspective, I feel. And I'd really like somebody who has that perspective to call in so we can discuss it. I'm not a forester, okay? I mean, it's not like I know everything about forest fires and about forests. I do have a background in forest entomology, so I did study some of this stuff many decades ago. But I don't claim to have the monopoly on you know, the reasons why we're seeing so many really big and, you know, destructive forest fires right now all over the planet. I don't have all the answers, but I was really curious about this whole concept of the fuel load, and I'm convinced that it's an effort to get, you know, forests out of the hands of government, right? To privatize perhaps some of these lands so that they can be managed for resources for capitalists to make a bunch of money, and not just preserved as, you know, for conservation, right? Public lands, to get some of these public lands out of the public's hands and put them into private hands. I really feel like there is, and I don't just feel this way. I hate to put it that way, because it's not just that I have a feeling. I looked up some of the people that are writing these articles, and they're connected to, you know, right-wing think tanks, like the Atlas Group or whatever. You know, I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that I think that this is really, and maybe they actually, the people that write these articles about what I'm going to call the fuel theory of wildfires, you know, that fires are happening because we haven't managed our forest properly, and that's why, you know, we're seeing all these forest fires, and that we need to manage our forests, like, you know, like Trump's always talking about, oh, we need to clean up the forest floor, or whatever he says, sweep the forest. It's ridiculous. Anyway, it's part of that. It's that whole. So Trump, of course, is not very eloquent about the way he expresses himself, but that's the same idea, right? That the fuel is building up on the forest floor, and that is what is feeding these wildfires. So I'm reading a lot of these articles, and wondering about them, like wondering what the agenda is, right? What's actually behind some of this, what I would call propaganda, and maybe a overly simplistic view of forest management, and so I was looking up some things, and I found some. I want to bring up three, because I would love somebody to call in and have a discussion with me about this. 3 points I want to make. All right, so. And these are points that counter the fuel theory, what I'm going to call the fuel theory of forest fires. All right, first point. These are facts. I got them from reputable, credible, you know, sources. 1972 to 1987. So that is a stretch of over 10 years in Yellowstone. There were 237, well, I should have done this for, let's do the numbers. 237 blazes, forest fires that happened during that period, and they all self-extinguished. This was in areas, you know, wild areas that were not necessarily, you know, managed areas. They self-extinguished because the climate conditions were not necessarily conducive to making them bigger. So they burned for a while, and without any intervention at all, they went out. And the reason for that is that the climate conditions were not such that these fires were, you know, exacerbated. during that period. That's my first point. Despite the fact that there was fuel, right, available. They just went out. So it's not like having fuel building up on the forest floor, made these fires uncontrollable like the ones we're seeing now. Here's another one. Here's another point. All right. Big fires all burned, all the big fires that we've seen, the really big ones, have all burned through clear cuts, places where there was fuel reduction did not stop the fires from burning. They just were so big that they just burned right through the clear-cut areas, right? Because this fuel thing, the fuel theory people are really saying is that we need to cut, right? We need to have areas where we clear cut, so that we can, because the clear cuts in their mind are gonna act as are gonna block, the flame. They're gonna cause the forest fire to go out, because the forest fire will hit the clear cut and then it will just die because it can't spread anywhere. But is not what happens. That's not what happens. And a lot of times these clear cuts are just full of fuel anyway, right? They just leave all of the branches and all the stuff just there. There's no incentive for them to clean up anything anyway. So it's full. So these clear cuts are full of fuel. They don't block the fires and make them the fires just jump across the clear cuts. They just jump across. They're so powerful, these fires, that they're not stopped by a clear cut. And the last point I want to make is that thinning. So if you go in and you thin out the trees in a forest, I guess the result of that, and this makes sense to me, is that you're exposing the forest floor to drying, because the sun, of course, is going to, penetrate the canopy and it's going to hit the forest floor. It's going to dry out whatever's there. Whereas in a dense forest, where there aren't, those places where the sunlight can get to the forest floor, the moisture content in the forest floor is actually higher, so that is a deterrent to fires burning. So increases the moisture level, the dense forests. Just some things to think about. I really feel like this fuel theory of forest fires, which I've heard a lot of recently, people have not really thought it through entirely. And the people that are making these claims, it's not like they're, forest people, we call forest managers or whatever, right? They don't know. They're just, a bunch of think tank people. They're not out there. They don't really know like they haven't studied forest management. I hate the whole idea of management when it comes to nature. I mean, nature doesn't need us to manage it. If we give nature plenty of habitat, it will manage itself. We don't need humans. We have an overbloated sense of our importance, I feel. And we always feel like we have to, manipulate stuff and manage things, things that don't require our intervention. The reason for the big forest fires, it is the position of the show. It is the position of me, so therefore it's the position of the show, because I am the show, that climate change is what's causing, oh my gosh, really? No way. Yes, climate change is what's causing, that's what's making these fires worse. It's the climatic conditions. If you have, drought, because of the higher temperatures, we have more drought, things get drier, then you have wind, right? And that's what spreads the fire. It's really the climate conditions that are making these fires so destructive. And if we lived right now in a sensible, reasonable society, we would be making that connection all the time. You know, the media would be making that connection. Politicians would be making that connection. We'd all be discussing it. We'd all be not afraid to say that it's climate change and that it's caused by us burning fossil fuels. And we need to stop burning fossil fuels and transition to a clean energy economy. Are we past the point of no return? I don't know. I don't care. I think that we need to stop. You know, the idea that we're just going to throw up our hands and just say, well, we're past the tipping point, so, or we're past this particular, milestone, therefore we should just give up and just continue to destroy ourselves. I mean, what a terrible position to have. Like, why would you have that position? We need to get off of fossil fuels. $725 billion we spend globally on subsidizing fossil fuels. Imagine if we spent that money on transitioning to a clean energy economy. Imagine that. So there are things that we can do, and I'm just, I'll go down with the ship, and the ship's going down. I'm going to still be saying we can fix it, okay? We can fix it. We can fix nature loss, and we can fix climate change. And we are throwing homeostasis off. This is my new way of thinking about this. I don't know. I just started thinking about it this way. Oh, you know why I started thinking about the homeostasis angle? Because I was reading about the acidification of the ocean, okay? And so the more CO2 we have, CO2 is raising the amount of acid, the amount of hydrogen ions in the ocean, which is lowering the pH. In other words, the ocean is becoming more acidic. It's the best way to put it, Lara. Come on. The ocean is becoming more acidic. So there's a relationship between CO2 and acidification. And so we talk about this. So I teach anatomy and physiology, and we talk about acidosis, which is when there's a relationship between the CO2 in your body and acid in your blood, how acidic your blood is. So if you have, too much CO2 in your blood, that is going to cause acidosis. That's going to make your blood more acidic. Acidosis is, of course, it will of course make you very sick. And if your pH drops below 7, right, you will die from that. And it's the same thing with the acidification of the ocean. You get more CO2, that's driving acidification, right? So the ocean is becoming more acidic, but it doesn't take much to destroy all of the life in the ocean. All of the ecosystems in the ocean are dependent on us keeping the pH in a very narrow, just like in your body, it's a narrow range, right? And if you throw it a little bit off one way or another, that results in sickness, which is, I believe, where we are right now on the planet. And if you drive it too far, it can result in death. And that's what can happen in the ocean. Now, if everything in the ocean were to die, okay, let's just say, right, once again, I think sounding the alarm is important. That would mean that the algae, which is in the ocean, we also talk about this. I talk about this with my students in microbiology class, that algae does most of the photosynthesis on the planet. Not the trees, not the plants that you see on land, but the algae in the ocean. And so if the algae is unsupported, then we lose a lot of the photosynthesis on the planet. Okay, this is a thought experiment, okay? Photosynthesis produces oxygen. And the reason we have oxygen, breathable oxygen, the reason we can live, we're aerobes, we need oxygen. The reason we can survive on this planet is because of photosynthesis. If you don't have enough photosynthesis going on, you don't have enough oxygen to support aerobes, which are most of the animals, including ourselves. So just think about that. Think about how everything is connected. CO2 drives the acidification kills everything, including the algae. The algae does the photosynthesis. We don't have enough oxygen. We're destroying our life support system, in other words, people. All right, but we can fix it, right? We can fix it. I was going to talk about something else, but we don't have time, so I'm skipping that. And we're moving on to peruse the news.
It's time to peruse the news. It's time to peruse the news. It's time to peruse the news. It's time to peruse the news.
We've arrived at section 3. Section 3, segment 3? Segment 3 is probably better. Segment 3 of the show. And still, I'm waiting for somebody to call in and talk to me about, the fuel theory of forest fires, or my newfound way of talking about the planet, which is as planet as human body, like as homeostasis. I'm still refining my talking points on that, by the way. So that's what I do on this show, is I kind of work through my talking points. That's part of what I'm doing here. And trying to raise the alarm and have discussions about, keeping the environment in the conversation. Everybody's ignoring. When I say everybody, I'm talking about, I can only speak for the United States. I think the other countries in the world are doing much better. In the United States, we are not addressing the environment. We're ignoring it completely. Everybody is. Not everyone. That's hyperbole. Not everybody is ignoring it, but when I think about decision makers, like politicians, people on the left, people on the right, people down the middle, I don't know, everybody, not everybody, right? A lot of people are ignoring the environment, and I think it's the number one issue. I think we, not only is it the most important issue, it's the issue that should be at the center. Like if I were running right now, the environment would be the organizing principle of my platform. That's what it would, and that's what I feel that is what people should be talking more about. So this is my attempt. This show is my attempt to keep the environment in the conversation. It's also a way for me to vent, and there's all kinds. It serves all sorts of purposes. But I really would like people to call in, because it is a call-in show. But in the meantime, I am going to peruse the news. So I have 3 articles I found this week the 2 of which are very positive. I love. So let's get through the bad news first, and then we'll go to the good stuff. All right. So I found this one in the Independent. Companies are still ignoring nature loss. All of the 2030 targets are bound to be missed when it comes to nature loss. Companies are still ignoring nature loss. It has been rated as one of the top global risks since 2020. So for 6 years now, it's been rated as one of the top global risks. So it's not like these big companies, you got to get these big companies on board, because they're the ones that are doing most of the nature destroying. It's not like they're not aware, because they've been aware for 6 years at least, but they're just not acting on biodiversity loss. Is this surprising? I don't know. It's just depressing to me how little action is being taken on this front. I mean, it's right in our face. It's so important. Nature loss is the critical issue of our time, and people are ignoring it, and they're ignoring it because they're making money. That's why they're ignoring it primarily. That's my guess. I'm sure it's a little more complex than that, but not much. There was the Convention on Biodiversity. Everybody signed on to the Convention of Biodiversity except, oh, surprise, surprise, the U.S. and also the Vatican, believe it or not. The Holy See. Yeah, I had to look that up. I didn't know what the Holy See was. The Holy See, I guess, is the Vatican. Anyway, the convention has, on biodiversity, had some goals that people signed on to, except for the U.S. and the Holy See. 30% of this is what people were agreed to under this Convention on Biodiversity. 30% of land and sea conserved by 2030. So 30% I think right now conservation, land and sea, it's something like 8% or something. So bring it up to 30%. So that's a significant increase. Far cry from E.O. Wilson's 50%, which is what I think we should do, but 30% is better than 8, so that's good. Restore damaged ecosystems and cut subsidies that harm nature. That was part of this Convention on Biodiversity that everybody except the U.S. and the Vatican signed on to, and we're missing our goals. So we're far from achieving that. People had lofty goals. They signed on to this. They agreed to it. But we are far from making that happen, unfortunately. Not unfortunately. We need to change. That's all. I don't want to say. When I say unfortunately, it makes me think that we're giving up. We shouldn't give up. We should just. That's the reality of the situation. We need to do better, right? All right. So speaking of doing better, we've got a couple of very positive things. I've got just a couple minutes. So I wanted to mention that. There's a lot of talk this week about these floating wind turbines. They're floating, okay? So they don't have to disrupt the ocean floor by putting these big, concrete pylons or whatever in there. They float on the surface. And this particular floating wind farm is 11 miles off the coast of Portugal. And what they have found is that there is no negative effect on plankton, and that it's even nature positive. So there's more fish around these. They're kind of like reefs, right? Reefs, not reeves. Reefs. Reefs. There's more fish. There's more octopuses. My favorite. They're not my favorite, but they're up there in my favorite animal group. It's very hard for me to decide. I love all animals. It has like a reef effect. So there's mussels, there's, seaweed, there's kelp, there's barnacles on these things. So they're actually nature positive, right? They're supporting nature. And here's the kicker. I hope Donald Trump's listening to the show. No bird collisions. Zero bird collisions. All right. Floating wind turbines. We can do floating solar panels as well. And, these can have these are not just things that don't impact nature in a negative way. They actually support nature. In other words, they are what? They are nature positive. All right. One more quick thing. The Phoenix Species Project launched the global effort. This is a global effort to bring 100 of the world's most threatened species back from the brink. And you know who's apparently heading this up and financing it and everything? Leonardo DiCaprio, believe it or not. So thank you for that. All right. See, rich people can make a difference. Believe it or not. Well, we have yet to see if it makes a difference, but it's at least an effort to bring 100 of the world's most threatened species back from the brink. And if you go to their website, you can see what those 100 species are. They're all kinds of different animals, beautiful animals that we don't want to lose, right? All right, so it's been wonderful hanging out on a Thursday night, talking about nature, talking about the biodiversity crisis and how we can fix it. talking about the climate crisis and how we can fix that. And I like to end the show by reminding everybody that being kind is a radical act these days. And so I would suggest to people that we all go out of our way to be kind, not just to one another, to exercise compassion, not just towards one another, but also towards nature, and that we put some love into the world, right? And I will see you another time, another Thursday night on Let's Have